may push go. Good morning to the Caron YouTube community and those of you who are here with me this morning. I was profoundly moved by the music that we just heard. Sorry that we can't put that on a stream channel, but also hello to anybody who might be watching on campus on the closed circuit TV. I try to pay attention to the calendars of the different wisdom traditions of the world, and because we often have people in our patient community who represent various traditions, and this is a Sunday of proximity to a lot of different occasions of meeting, and perhaps the one that's like the loudest and most important would be Yom Kippur, which begins tonight in Judaism as the perhaps the holiest day of the Jewish year. It finishes a like 10-day cycle of Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, 2 days, and it marks a period of redemption from our imperfection in the grace of having yet another year in which to live. It also is the case that yesterday at 2 a.m., astronomical calendar marked the autumnal equinox. And so this is a midpoint between summer and winter, and the time when the length of daylight and the length of darkness between sunset and sunrise match up. And so a balance point, I think many traditions look at it in that way. And the season of harvest. I just was on a farm on Friday, which was perfect for me to be given an opportunity to reflect on how harvest festivals in the Northern Hemisphere involve the ending of something and the anticipation of the future spring and summer that are yet way ahead. And there are festivals that are harvest festivals. There's a thing called Mabon. We can have a Mabon prayer, which is in the earth-based indigenous traditions. Interesting, many traditions around the world pay attention to equinox and solstice. Makes a lot of sense. And many of the wisdom traditions sort of pal up around that. So there's a thing called Michaelmas. The Celtics have Michaelmas on September 29th, but it's a fall harvest festival, and most religious scholars think Michaelmas was just a pairing with the pagan and Wiccan celebrations of the Mabon festival in those areas. So a lot of reasons to be like, woohoo, and get to do that sober now, which is awesome. And I have a series of topics for the chapel service, and today's topic is surrender. And so I was thinking about how surrender, harvest, equinox, those things might line up. And the thing that occurred to me immediately was that surrender marks change, and that these midpoints and extremes of the orbit of the planet also are points that we use to mark change. And they're, while the astronomers can give us exact moments, they're also sweeping changes that come in our lives. But surrender is a key topic in addiction recovery. You find it addressed in meetings in the 12-step communities over and over and over again. Sponsors working with their sponsees, saying, I don't think you've surrendered, and I have surrendered, and it's a matter of confusion and debate and claim and counterclaim, and often patients who come back here having had sustained abstinence for a period and then found themselves returning to use will say, I think I didn't get the surrender piece and all that stuff. And so I have another few minutes to completely clear that up for everybody. I may disappoint if I promise that. One of the things that helped me a lot in trying to tease into the reason why this has stayed so perennial a theme in addiction recovery was when I heard in AA the paradox that we surrender to win. Because I had very negative connotations with the word surrender. And you may very well also. And I think that's because of the programming that I had as a young child to associate surrender in a military sort of way. And surrender was to be avoided. Maybe there's a male macho piece of it too. Never give up, never give in, never surrender. And And I think that it's one of the reasons why it's a tremendous obstacle for people in addiction recovery is that I believe that's a misunderstanding. And there's a path that opens when a struggle begins. And so if I'm a person who's trying to find my way into recovery, I'm invited to take a concept or a word or an element of the program of recovery, and I am not sure I'm ready for it, then what happens is a kind of a debate, an engagement with the subject, and a desire on my part to have the particulars. Exactly, what am I surrendering to? What are the terms? What can I negotiate my surrender? And can I all that sort of stuff? And in my outline behind me, I have 4 words: minimization, rationalization, denial, and justification. These are things that as clinicians we're taught to watch for and seek to help clients to see their own activity of the brain, to sort of duck and dodge and try to avoid some sort of profound embrace of what I think is finally at the end it's a fairly simple concept. The chapel service here was founded 36 years ago by an icon, an amazing man. His name was Father Bill Holtberg, and his legacy continues very powerfully to this day, not just because I like to remember him to our clients and alumni, but because he just lives on in a variety of ways in this place. And I remember I paid tremendous attention to him because I came to realize that things that bothered me about him were things I needed to look at, and that his wisdom was so remarkably spot on that I should look at those rubbing points and learn from them. So one of the things when Father Bill would introduce himself, people know it as like, "Hey, Father Bill, yo," and he was way cooler than I was at 70 something, and I don't even try, but he also had a tagline for every time he introduced himself, and instead of giving himself the typical descriptions of I'm an addict or I'm an alcoholic, he used to say, Father Bill, yo, powerless over a lot of things. At first I thought that was a dodge, like he wasn't telling us about what he was addicted to or around, but then I came to realize that my powerlessness was similar, and that yes, I have been abstinent from alcohol and mind-altering chemicals for a nice long stretch of time, but I watched my addictive tendencies continue to manifest. I made the mistake of buying Clark's Nuts popcorn in the Chicago airport yesterday. If you haven't had it, don't get it. It's like crack. And I'm in the plane, like snarfing this stuff, and the flight attendant is like, "Oh, I didn't get my popcorn," and I felt like she was asking if I could give her some. No, I'm holding on to my stash to the end, you know. And me, an addict, no. Powerless over a lot of things. Powerlessness similarly ends up being this nitpicky debate issue. And there's an underlying point here that nitpicking doesn't do much except seek to avoid and sort of like contain or curtail. And I have in my soul the desire to somehow express one can either surrender to one's powerlessness and then it becomes not a matter of debate, we just do, or as soon as I'm engaged in the conversation, well, what am I surrendering to? What am I powerless over? What am I not? I'm like, yeah, you're kind of missing the point. So I'm powerless over the past. That's a really helpful truism. I cannot change yesterday. I do know what it means for me to say I'm powerless over alcohol. And some people say, well, Jack, you're not powerless over alcohol. You don't drink. And I'm like, but I do know that if I were to consume it, it would consume me, right? And this is the nature of the power relationship. I don't have power over it, and it has power over me. And the acquiescence to this is truth. If that's a different word. Acquiescence is a synonym here for me for surrender. I must acquiesce to the truth of these realities that I have been beaten in this form of combat, and that I must wave the white flag of victory, right? It's not a bad thing. It's the best thing in the world to find out I don't have to go into battle anymore. I don't have to wake up bloody in the morning. I don't have to vomit in the toilet of people's homes that are trying to offer me hospitality and include me in their celebrations. I don't have to live the misery of the captivity of an addicted life, except for peanuts. And so a couple of illustrations. I recently was watching The Morning Show, which is a television series on Apple TV. It's really an extraordinary piece of television. There's a lot of amazing TV out there these days. Too much to, if you can subscribe to every series, you can spend a lot of money. Anyway, the third season of The Morning Show is out, and one of the characters ends up going up in a low orbital experience and is shackled in a chair for the G-forces that they experience to get up to low Earth orbit. And then there's a moment in the show when she unclips herself from the seat and ends up in free fall with the other people who are in this sort of a take on the Virgin Atlantic reality, but it's not called that in the show. And it depicts what it is to be in free fall. And there's a giggling and a wonder and an amazement. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about the message coming up for this week on the issue of surrender. And I remembered one of the subjects I studied many, many years ago that I found very fascinating was physics. And if you don't know or love physics, I apologize for diverting into that subject area, but physics is incredible. It's spiritual. To me, it's almost religious. And what it does is it takes a look at the world in which we exist, and it reveals some of its mysteries in ways that are just mind-bogglingly beautiful. So if you go all the way back to Archimedes in physics, the idea was that an object at rest stays at rest, an object in motion stays in motion. And this was his sort of proposal. It turned out to not be true in the world in which we live, because an object let go of would fall, and friction stopped things, and so an object in motion didn't stay in motion. But this idea of things that stay, stop, staying, stop, and things that are moving continue to move, relativity and all that sort of stuff, only occurs in one type of experience that human beings can have, which is in free fall. If I'm in free fall, I'm falling from the 99th floor or something, and I have an apple in my hand, I can take the apple and set it in front of me, and it'll track with me. So that and this is called an inertial reference frame. It's a time and place in which Newtonian mechanics and the parabolas of a gravitational ball things stay still, or once pushed, they stay in motion until acted on by another force. Sorry, get lost here. The point I have is that I'm trying to offer you an invitation to think of surrender as free fall, and the entrance into recovery as that kind of a leap. It's described as a leap of faith, but I also would suggest it's a leap of not knowing. It's a leap of not being clear. It's a decision to surrender in which the terms of your surrender are not going to be able to be specified in some contract that you can nitpick the crap out of later. It is a decision to let go of certainty in favor of a kind of freedom that comes when you just float in the reality of the world as it comes to you. And this allows the flows of the world around you to manifest in ways that will turn out to be way more helpful. And you might think this is a dangerous promise. I don't think it's a dangerous promise, because it turns out that this is the case. If you allow the surrender of recovery to be the way that you go about your life, what you will find is that the universe, there are synergies that the action of resistance and protection and security and care inhibit from happening. So last night, I'm in the Philadelphia airport. I'm on the plane. They can't get the jetway to get to the plane. We've been asked to allow passengers who have connections to stand and get out first because they're going to miss their connection. So there's this like, I hate that angst when you like know you're going to have to run to the next plane. And there's a perfectly wonderful human being, I'm assuming, standing right in front of me. And I was a little annoyed because I had to advocate, like as soon as they rang the bell, everybody started jumping up and they were going to clog the aisle so that the people needed to make their connections. So I said, hey people, we were asked to wait. And I would be like, oh yeah, all right. So the woman who's standing right next to me, I have an aisle seat, is one of these people who's going to miss her connection. If they can't get the jetway to the thing and then she's going to sprint to the next gate, well, they can't get the jetway. It's like she's watching her clock and the time is clicking by, and so I strike up a conversation. I said, powerlessness, right? And she goes, oh my God. And I said, so where are you going? And blah, blah, blah. And then eventually I said, I'm going to preach on surrender tomorrow. You mind if I use you as an example? She goes, oh, that would be perfect. Because she just had to give up control. And finally, the time for her flight connection was gone. They took them 25 minutes to get the jetway to attach to the plane. And the three people in front of her were going to Venice, Italy, and they also missed their flight. So they were pretty akamai about it. I would have been really, really, I would have struggled with this. I struggled with this, I think we all struggle with it. But, and one of the things I want to point out is the subtleties around this. So, as I was struggling to figure out how to describe surrender to you, I had to realize I had to surrender to the ability to describe surrender perfectly. If you want to surrender, if I find to describe, just let it go. And then as I'm trying to tell you that the universe will do things that it can only do if you surrender to it, I'm realizing that this woman here is an example for me. It has delivered me an example I can use as a sermon illustration. It's an either-or way of living. It's a way of living that either clings tightly and lives in angst and oh my God, if I hear anxiety one more time, I'm not saying, but I think we have been anxious as people for thousands and thousands of years, and suddenly we've decided that people who are extremely anxious need to be medicated into the less anxious zone, and people who are quite moody need to be medicated out of the moody zone. And we've decided that there's this neurotypical frame that everyone has to be in, and so medicine and behavioral health and family understanding, all that sort of stuff, we've diagnosed diversity and pathologized uniqueness. If I asked who was weird in the room, I hope every hand would go up. If not, you're in delusion. Let go of the desire to conform to these standards and bizarre notions of controllability in the world in which we live. The harvest is a time of ending. But one of the great things about being on a planet, and the reason I was in Iowa is I was with my sister for her 70th birthday, and we were handing on family heirlooms to my nephew, who is one of the only people who's going to carry on our family name. And this is a way in which death is part of a cycle. We had a piece of paper in our hands. I wasn't going to say this, but I'd say I had a piece of paper in my hands from Francis, that's my middle name, Abel, who immigrated to the United States from Germany in it was 180 years old, whatever that is, 1840 something. And this is where my family name crosses the Atlantic and becomes a part of an American family history. And so even when things end, there is a peculiar continuation of that. And this is the promise of surrender, is that almost everything that we seek to control, I think, will engage us in a peculiar and somewhat tragic distraction, a battle of focus. When there's a beautiful scripture in the Christian Testament where Jesus talks about lilies and birds. They don't have to worry, they just are. And I believe that this is an invitation in the 12-step frame that people miss, don't understand. That what it, and that perhaps our drinking and drug use is very connected to the fears and yearnings and myth that the world should be able to be in our grasp. So take the leap, let things happen. I know this is a time and place of change, but the harvest ahead from your beginnings of recovery, I promise you, will be beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.